This is Peter and Adam from Sons of Silver, and you are watching Aftershocks TV.
Yeah. All right, Matt and Chris, we're here for another episode this week on Aftershocks TV. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. As we'd like to welcome our very special guest this week, who's got quite the extensive resume to the point where I thought I nailed down everything you've done, Alex, over the years. But once I thought I did, I realized I was just starting to scratch the surface of your resume, man. And we've got the Windy City guitar legend himself here, Mr. Alex Kane. What's going on, Alex? Thanks for coming on with us, bud.
I've learned that when people call me a legend, it's really just because I never made it big and I'm still going. It just means I'm old. Well, I'm still ornery as all get out. So that's the other realization that I've come to. I'm going to be 59 actually in a week. But the other realization that I've come to is that you were never cool ever until you're cool at 70.
Okay.
Right. Well, because everybody gets young and beautiful. Well, obviously not you two, but everybody else gets. Everybody else gets young and beautiful once for free. So the question is, what do you do with it once that time is over? I chose rock and roll, and I'm very proud of the fact that in spite of literally being on tour for 40 years, I am busier now at this point in my life than I've ever been before. And part of it is never allowing myself to suck. Never cheesing a gig. I don't give a F-bomb if there's... The guys cautioned me before we went on, so that's why I'm desperately self-censoring myself. But I have never cheesed a gig ever in my life. If there's 20 people or 20,000, and I've played to both, more so 20 than 20,000, but you get the same damn show because... I've never done a show for the people that stayed at home and watched Netflix. I've always given my everything out of respect for the time and the fact that they spent money to come down and see what I'm doing. And I treat every show as though it's going to be the last time I've ever played. And a part of the other thing that's cool about being around for 40 years on tour is I see new generations of rock and roll come up behind me. And the greatest compliment I can ever get, well, I mean, oh my God, that was great. Nobody ever did it like that before would be one thing, but that's not what we're talking about. But the greatest compliment that I can get is when a young guitar player, and young being anybody, I don't know, under my age, I guess. But so particularly, like I have great, unbelievably talented, fiery guitar players from as young as 18, up to my age, whatever, that I love and respect, who say nice things about me, and I see them steal some of my shit, and that's the best that's the best compliment when I'm sitting in an audience and I'm going, I'm standing right in front of you now. And you know exactly where you got this move or that trick or whatever from. But it also, which I guess is sort of a larger question, the more I'm able to claim influence or be given the credit for being influential to somebody's music and how they do it, and not just stand on their X and, worry about if their sweep is good. Which never, ever interested me. And my first touring pro gig was replacing Michelangelo Badio, which I don't know if you get. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Of course.
I was 20. Wait. Yeah, no, I was 20 years old into the Ramones and Cheap Trick.
Mm-hmm. Right. There you go.
And and somehow in Chicago, Mikey left the band Holland, right? It was a great band. I always would go see him play when I'd be in the front row watching that guy do his thing. And then Mikey left, and I'd come up a little bit on the scene, you know what I mean? And what I did was different than what a lot of guys were doing. So I got a little bit of traction right away, but it came from like a Ramones Cheap Trick place, Mm-hmm. so I was always in the front row watching Mikey play and being like, holy crap, I don't even know what this is, right? And then he split and moved to LA, started, I think, what was it called? No, I think it was called Michelangelo Badio, him and the singer from Odin.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah.
Right? From Decline of Western Civilization.
Sure.
Grew up with. And promised ourselves only to end up like Chris Holmes on weekends.
Randy O.
And that was in the 80s. Yeah, Randy O was the cat. Yeah, and they started a band. So he left Holland, which was a great band. I still to this day, the songs are amazing. And somehow I got the call. I got the job. And I would sit there literally for 12. But we would practice for 5 hours a day. Right? Very diligent, hardworking band. So the band would practice for 5 hours a day, and then I would go off on my own for another 8 to 10 hours sitting there trying to get Mikey's stuff together because it was so beyond, but I wasn't gonna. It was the first time that I learned the challenge is in fact the gift. If you don't stare what scares you straight in the face, it's always going to scare you. So I embraced the challenge, and I don't know. I mean, I remember playing shows, and he was already in his 30s, and his technique surpasses pretty much anybody on earth to this day.
Yes,
so I didn't really know what I was. I knew exactly what I was getting into. I just didn't realize how big a mountain it was. But he had this one solo called High Life, which anybody from Chicago back in the day, and I think he integrated it into one of his solo things. But it's literally a breathtaking solo. Literally a breathtaking solo. This song High Life, and then so now I got to do it. Right. And my right hand, I'm left-handed. I play backwards. And so my right hand is garbage at best. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you could pretty much cut this hand off and I wouldn't be much worse of a guitar player. There'd be a couple of things, but chords I'd suck at. And so anyway, I sat there and I worked and I worked and I worked, and I remember seeing Mikey play with Holland, and he would finish this breathtaking solo that's like across all the octaves on the guitar, and it's just so like skilled and perfect and whatever. And the place, including myself, the place would completely erupt into applause. Like the first time anybody heard Eruption, you know what I mean? Just like, oh my God, that was so amazing.
Right.
So now it's my turn without a right hand.
Yeah.
And so, and we would go into the song, and then I'd be like, oh God, here comes the solo. Like I still have PTSD from this. And I would do the very best I possibly could in the manner that I was able to get it somehow under control. And instead of like this just roar of approbation, it was, yeah, okay, all right. Nice try. And it was pretty much based on that experience that I decided I'm not going to try to play like anybody. I'm just going to play like me, and for better or for worse. And then that way, at least, I know what I'm capable of, and I know where my shortcomings are. And the other thing is, in spite of playing guitar for 43 years or whatever it is now, there's always something you can get better at, which is the nice thing about music, is that you can always learn something. You can always learn to do something you were never able to do. And so now at this point in my life, I know what I do and what I hear and how I play that. So now I'm integrating other things. So I'm really working on my right hand. I'm really figuring out ways that I can at least fake having a fast right hand too. Playing slide, which is never, I just got back from New York. And I played Joey Ramone's birthday bash, right? Mm-hmm. Which was, I've done it like 4 or 5 times now. I love it so much. And you're literally playing with the people that invented punk rock at CBGB's in New York City in the 70s, the ones that are still with us, they get up there and they play. And I'm like, I cannot believe I'm on stage with this guy right now,
Right.
I bought all the records, you know what I mean? Back when I was a kid in Chicago, going through the used record store bins, because remember, are you guys old enough to have experienced?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, of course. Yes. Mm.
The hours the hours,
Yep.
right?
Oh yeah.
And you discover
The
tough
hunts and hours. Yep.
the way.
The hunts. You go on those record store hunts. You know.
But you don't really do that with CDs. With records, it's like a portal to another dimension because of the size of it. I think, right? It's like when you opened Kiss Alive 2 in particular, and you saw the stage and the flames. It was like almost audience perspective if you were in the 20th row or whatever, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But like a CD, you open it up and you're now, being like, pushing 60 with the glasses. I'm like, is that fire or what is that? Is that vomit? But anyway, it was such a great experience. But the reason I even bring that up was I was playing with one of my favorite people on earth. But also first, he was one of my favorite guitar players on earth because his skill set is so wide and his note selection is just unbelievable. A guy named Steve Conte, who's right now he's with Michael Monroe, but before that he was in the New York Dolls. He played with Willie DeVille. He played with, I believe, had great songwriter, great singer. He graduated Berklee School of Music. The guy who replaced Johnny Thunders is actually an incredibly knowledgeable musician capable of playing slide and jazz. And he does and I didn't know this until earlier in the year. I saw him do one of his jazz gigs, and he does all that where you sing and play the stuff at the same time. Right.
Yeah.
And like, if I were to do that, it would literally sound like primal screaming or therapy or animal sound. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be, but it'd be, which gives me an idea. But, and subsequently, because he has punk rock roots, even though he's an incredibly skilled guitar player, more so. And I'm not saying just punk rock, because obviously,
he's done a lot of stuff outside of like Peter Wolf. I think had him on an album, and I know he did something with Billy Squier at some point, like very not punk.
Yeah.
As far away as you could get, as very generic kind of sounding rock as you could be.
But until he puts his imprint on there, and then it turns into something special, and that's why he gets hired. And it also, his whole family is incredibly musical. His mom was a jazz singer. His brother's a bass player, unbelievable bass player and singer as well. He's got a brand new album out called it's on Little Steven's label. It's a play on words, but Steve Conte, I forget the name just because whatever. But it's a totally cool album, and it's power pop.
Okay.
Oh wow!
It's all power pop, but not like spineless power pop, but like big star power pop, where there's a depth and a real place that it comes from, even though it's sort of Beatle-esque. The Beatles were never lacking for depth, and they were like the original power pop band, right? So the power pop that I love, and also the other thing about power pop, and God forbid this ever happens with me or Steve Conte or any of my friends that love power pop, but it's always the power pop guys that are the bipolar guys that end up hanging themselves or blowing their brains out. You know what I mean? It's never the metal guys. They'll eat the brain of their friend in the band, but they won't necessarily kill themselves. And so it's the power pop guys that are really we gravitate towards the light because we already get the dark, but Steve's new album is beautiful, and I can't recommend it highly enough. I actually bought the vinyl of it.
It's called Concrete Jangle.
Concrete Jangle, that's it. Thank you, Concrete Jangle. And I highly recommend it. Also, while I'm talking about my friends who I admire and I love and I look up to, I just got this yesterday, actually. Hang on 1 second. I know, it's great. It's unbelievable. And it's like a rock and roll power pop album. And this is from my friends. You know about this?
That's the guys that are Ace Frehley's band.
Yeah, and I love Ace Frehley and Steve Brown. He's another one. Like, we're super buddies and stuff because we come from opposite ends of life. And in the middle is rock and roll. So we totally love each other. And he produced that last Ace album, as I'm sure you know, and did an absolutely fantastic job. And Ace has never been bigger, or he hasn't been as good since Kiss as he is on this record. And that's Steve Brown sitting him down and not putting up with a bunch of, talk back or whatever and going, Ace, you can do better. But anyway, yes. So they also play in Ace Frehley's band, but again, that's what they do for a living. But it's the tip of the iceberg. A gorgeous iceberg. Don't get me wrong. I'm a huge Ace fan. But this is them writing and playing, and it is so good. It is crazy good. The melodies, the harmonies, the tunes, the riffs, it's everything that we love about rock and roll. If it was up to me, it would be a little bit dirtier, but they got this like super mega producer that needed to produce them because he wanted to do something rock and roll.
Right.
So they kind of cleaned it up a little bit. I like my rock and roll kind of dirty and careening.
Sure.
But I also love Def Leppard, the Mutt Lang album.
Right.
Love Queen and whatever, you know what I mean? So it's not just like a one-dimensional love of, it has to sound like it was produced in a garbage can. So this doesn't. This sounds like it was produced in the most expensive studio you could get at, but I cannot recommend it highly enough. I love this.
Yeah. I loved Ryan Cook, who's in the band. I loved him when he was doing Hair of the Dog years and years ago.
Okay, funny sidebar to Hair of the Dog. All right. I lived. There's a sidebar to everything in my life. I lived in England for a decade, right? Like I was telling you before we started recording, and all of those other words that I said. But so anyway, I moved to England on a whim. Literally, my friend Ginger, who has a band over there called the Wild Hearts, is him and Donnie V, both of whom I've had the honor of working and writing with. They are the best songwriters of my generation. And Ginger's, it's sickening. You turn around, literally, I remember, because we lived together for a year and a half, which kind of gives me an idea of what it was like to live in Berlin during the bombing in World War II. I mean, he's as intense a person as you will ever meet, but that also fuels his music. So you take you take all of the idiosyncrasies to get to the music, right? But I would come home from the studio and there'd be a different hole in a different wall every single night.
Yeah, wow.
To the point where I wasn't even like I was nonplussed anymore. Like I would come in and we'd start talking and I'd see the hole in the bathroom or whatever. I'd be like, "Oh, you had a rough night, buddy." Yeah, mate. Anyway. But so I lived there for a decade, and it was Ginger who brought me over. And then we were standing on a rooftop. We'd finished an album together called Clam Abuse. The drummer from The Prodigy played the drums, and then me and Ginger did everything else. We were standing on a rooftop in the West End. Now, this was April, okay, and we were drinking with some buddies. They were having a little bit of the afternoon party, as you do in England. And this is at the turn of the millennium, so it was a much more innocent time. 9/11 hadn't happened. There was no pandemic. People still liked each other. They liked congregating and talking, and they found more reason to exist other than to hate one another for not thinking the same way, which is like, I don't get people anymore. I root for climate change. That's me. But I do. I'm not even straight up. The only way that animals in the planet are going to get out of this alive is if we're gone. But, I'm loath to say that, even though I just did. Anyway, we're standing on the rooftop. People are having a great time. I got a glass of red wine in one hand. I got a joint in the other. It's about 4:00 in the afternoon. Ginger, being an incredibly cunning and smart guy, he comes up to me and he chooses this term. He goes, "If we're going to make your plane, we have to leave now." And I was like at the perfect crossroads of marijuana and red wine, right? And I just looked at him and I go, "I'm staying." And I lived there for a decade on the back of that one decision, right? So I came back. We did a tour, and now I officially live there. Me and him got the apartment together. after the tour, and we're hanging out and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I got to do something if I'm here. I might as well make music. So I put Antiproduct together, fan funding, as I was saying, 2000. Right. Mm-hmm. Cutting out that middleman. I need as few parasites in my life as possible. And so we did everything ourselves anyway. And then at one point, Ginger got a girlfriend or something like that. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll find another place and you guys get on and do your thing. One more shameless plug for my friends. Get the shirt too.
There you go.
Nice. Well, Alex, take a break, take a breath, get a glass or coffee in your mouth here. And let us get at least one question in here for you. How's that?
Fuck you guys. I'm not here to listen to you. I'm here to listen.
Well, we're gonna open the door back up for you, man.
Sorry, go on.
No, it's all good, man.
Ryan Cook story, but continue, please.
No.
Go ahead, man.
Well, let's go ahead. I mean, obviously, Alex, when we wanted to get you on here, obviously, to talk about, an album. You talked about the band Holland that you were in, and obviously, right shortly after that, you wound up joining Life, Sex, and Death. Obviously, an album here, The Silent Majority, that just gets better with age. I mean, it's really this
just
album,
like us.
There you go. Right? Yeah, perfect. I mean, I know Corey Taylor just covered Tank. That came out really good. There's something going on right now with this record. It's like gaining momentum.
I know.
Right?
I know.
I mean, it's crazy. After 30 plus years, I mean, it's got to be such a trip for you. I can only imagine what you're thinking when you're seeing all the accolades now, 30 years plus later, but I guess better late than never. But what do you think is going on? Why do you think this is having such a resurgence, this album?
Well, I mean, okay. I do everything in my power to distance myself from my ego. Okay. So none of what I'm about to say is being defensive, or I have a great life. I love it so much. I'm so lucky to be able to play rock and roll and to not suck and to still be relevant, even in my position in the underground. I'm totally aware of where I am, my lack of traction in the mainstream and whatever. So none of it. I am grateful for every second, every adventure, every challenge, everything that I've been able to achieve. Anyway, so none of it is born from ego. So let me preface by saying that. What happens oftentimes is people will say, oh, you guys were ahead of your time. And generally speaking, I've interpreted that to mean, sorry, bro, I like the album. I don't know what went wrong. Right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And but more and more, I am meeting particularly musicians, at least initially, who understood and appreciated what it took to sound and perform like that, right? Again, to understand how good or bad somebody is at something, you need to be at least that good or bad, right? So like I watch Mikey Badio play, and I'm like, well, I don't even know what this is anymore, right? So he's on that level, but like if Kotzen or somebody saw him play, he'd be like, or Lukather or Phil Axe, you know what I mean? If any of them cats saw Mikey play, they'd be like, oh, he's using the inverted seventh on the diminished ninth, whatever, you know what I mean? Me, I'm like, well, call me when something starts on fire. I can tell you how that happened. And Phil X, he's another one. Oh my God. He's one of my better friends too. And I just love him so much. He's so good. And there's a lot of people, I know this sidebar, forgive me, but there's so many people that wish to nameless as they will stay, that are thinking that they're sort of trying to claim the Eddie throne, but there is nobody that should have that throne more so than Phil, because he's got the fire. He's got that fucking fire that is irreplaceable. You lose it only when you walk away from it, and he's never going to walk away from it. What that guy does is on a whole other level altogether, really. That's a sidebar, though. But he's actually one of the cats that got Life, Sex, and Death. You know what I mean? Corey Taylor, literally, I don't know if anybody knows this, but literally Marilyn Manson formed at our Life, Sex, and Death show in Florida the first time we played there in front of 20 people.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And one of them was Brian Warner when he was still a writer, and then the other one was the bass player who's passed away now, Gidget Geen, I guess, was that name. You know, and don't be a drug addict. It's a waste of time. You'll never get those years back. So avoid that as much as you possibly can if you're considering being a drug addict. But what do I want to do today? I don't know. Let's become goals. So they formed, and you know, the more I'm in the game and the more I hang out with people and get to know other people and stuff, the more I realize how profound an impact that had. But apparently, initially at least, only on multi-platinum selling artists.
Right.
And you know, Corey being another one. Corey got a hold of me on Instagram, right? When I started selling the Life, Sex, and Death shirts and the merch and the records. And by the way, if you need anything from my music, you come to me directly. I want to thank everybody that supports my music firsthand. I've got everything. I sell it directly. I communicate directly with the people that are buying it. They are, as I said before we started recording, they don't need me. I need them. So I have a responsibility to let them know they're allowing me to do this. And as a result, I don't get caught up my own asshole fucking, sorry, that's too.
That's fine.
It's all good, dude. Yeah.
I don't have time to get lost in self-delusion, right? I know exactly where I am. I know who I am, and I'm grateful to be in the position that I'm in. So Corey literally got a hold on me on Instagram, and he goes, "Hey, you know," and I'm like, "This isn't answering. You're not Corey Taylor from Slipknot." No, it's really me. I love the album. And I'd actually heard previously when Joey Jordanson was still with us that he was a big Life, Sex, and Death fan too. So I kind of had an insight into that whole band loved Life, Sex, and Death. And then I talked to Christian, who's now a dear friend of mine, who plays guitar in Corey's band. And then I meet Tony from Papa Roach, who's oh my God, talk about kick-ass bands that know how to survive. Papa Roach. Oh, for like the guys that came after me that figured out how to stick around. What other bands from 2000 does anybody give a crap about anymore?
Yeah.
There's not many. Yeah.
Not many. Limp Bizkit, Korn, that's about it. Disturbed.
And, you know, and Disturbed, yeah. They were a little bit later, but that's a good call, good choice. I didn't think about them. But as far, because, I mean, Papa Roach came out as like, we are a hardcore band from New York, the streets, and they were smart enough to know how to evolve. And I will say something else. You know who's having mainstream commercial hits? Not Korn.
Yeah.
Papa Roach figured it out.
Sure.
And they're still one of the best live bands you will ever see. That guy, Jacoby, he knows how to run an audience without having to resort to tricks because he believes rock and roll here. So when he's whipping people up, it's because he's whipped up already. It's not like, come on, you mother effers, in the back. I don't want you to call me a mother effer because, first of all, I've never met your mom. And second of all, it's just low-hanging fruit, man. Think of some new stuff. That's low-hanging fruit. Go deeper. And that guy, he knows how to enthuse an audience. Iggy Pop knows how to enthuse an audience. Like, he is there in the moment, doing it real time, not resorting to antics and tricks and whatever, you know. And as another sidebar, now that we're 3 sidebars away from your question, I do have hope for Manson. I do have hope for Manson because he's an incredibly smart guy that got caught up in the character, okay? We all know guys that's happened to, right? Whether or not he's innocent or guilty, I don't know. I was not in the bedroom. I can't speak to that. But I know for a fact he's doing everything he can to be the best version of himself today, right? Iggy Pop did crazy stuff. All them guys, Jimmy Page, we don't even want to know what he got up to, but he just didn't get busted. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's a thing. And anybody that does wrong, don't do bad stuff to good people or people that don't want it done to them. We weren't there, so we can't really comment on anything that these guys did. But I got hope that he's going to find his rage and he's going to come back and he's going to have more information, and he is going to be able to share that information with the people. I think he can come back from his, dare I say, fat Elvis phase. And even Elvis, he was watching 13-year-olds wrestle, okay? There's a lot of good Christians that still look up to Elvis Presley, and they give him a pass. So it's like, hey, you haven't lived that life, so you can't really comment on it until you understand what it was like to be Elvis Presley, right? So anyway, I got hope for Manson. I think he's going to make a great album. I think he's going to come back hungry and angry with something to say. I don't think he's done. I really don't. And I hope he atones, and I hope he's made his peace. And I do, and not saying this from the manosphere thing, which is just disgusting to me, but frankly speaking, but if you realize you made a mistake and you accept responsibility and you try to make the world a better place than when you found it, and if you I know friends of mine that have been accused of stuff that I know for a fact would never be able to do what they've been accused of, right? I know that for a fact. I'm not laying blame whatsoever. I'm just saying it's an empirical truth. I have friends who were accused of doing stuff that never ever did it. They wouldn't. They're not corrupt enough, or whatever the word you want to think of, or they would never let themselves get into that kind of a state. Anyway, all of that having been said, why is life, sex, and death bigger now than it's ever been? One thing I would say is because there was no sort of hybridization of Cheap Trick and Metallica yet, because there was no Foo Fighters, none of that stuff until much later. The Midwestern perspective, the Midwestern work ethic, we weren't the stupidest band. We had a policy that was, we were at rehearsal when we were rehearsing in LA. Our policy was we are the first band in and we are the last band out. And what we did was we worked 5 days a week, first band in, last band out, to make it look so easy that anybody could do it, until you tried to do it. And then you realized, wait a minute, these guys make it look super easy. We were a gang. We fought like brothers, obviously, particularly Brian and myself, and then secondarily Chris / Stanley and myself. But it was always because we really believed what we were saying, not just to blow off hot air or whatever. We were driven to be the best we could possibly be. And we wanted desperately to make a statement. Now, I can only speak from my perspective as one of the primary songwriters. My goal was to make a timeless record of depth that would be surprising, hopefully, for generations and decades, right? And that band was meant to be like the Sex Pistols, burn out, not fade away, right?
Right.
And because I'm a counselor down at Alice Cooper's Solid Rock. I'm not Christian. I just try to be I try my best to be the best version of me. And I'm maybe I believe anyway, one of the few non-Christians down there. But which incidentally, and sidebar, sorry for having me on. even though I'm not Christian, I do have a belief in something greater than ourselves that binds everything that we are responsible for in our behavior and our decisions. When in 2022, I thought I was out of the game. I thought I was never going to play again. I thought I was never going to get hired again. I had to say no to tours because I had mom to take care of in the middle of the pandemic. So I didn't have the option of gallivanting out there, getting sick and coming back and killing my mom, who's got a respiratory ailment, right? So like Chip would call me up and he was like, hey, we got 6 weeks with Faster Pussycat. And I'm like, I can't do that. I have to take care of my mom right now. And going out there and, you know, not everyone in the band, but there were facets of people in that band that thought it was a quote unquote hoax. I was not willing to take that unprofessional opinion seriously, right? I had to do what was best for my 82-year-old at the time, dementia-ridden mom. You know what I mean? So I thought I was out of the game. I didn't think I was going to get called. I didn't think I would, you know what I mean? And then when I began to see light at the end of the tunnel and time went by and we were able to figure out ways to deal with it, you know what I mean? Let alone that most of the people that died were mom's age, right? So I was unwilling to take that chance. But then when, you know, there was that light at the end of the tunnel and I sort of baby steps and I started getting calls and I did anything that was offered to me. So people knew, hey, I am still out here. I do not suck yet. I still have hair, et cetera, you know what I mean? All the things that are important in music. No, I'm kidding about that. But and then that turned into having too much work, more work than most people could really stand. But I am so grateful that the phone does ring, that blah, 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 blah. But there was pockets within that camp that didn't take it seriously. So that was one more reason I couldn't do that, because they weren't taking it seriously. I was taking it deadly seriously because mom's all I got. I'm an only child, you know what I mean? So I want mom to be happy. I want her to have ice cream whenever she wants ice cream. And, you know, and I just want her to know that I care and I'm her son and that she's safe now, you know? So in getting back out there and sort of, you know, seeing everyone again or seeing people for the first time, I was stunned at how many professional musicians really hold this album in regard, right? I didn't, and their kids, right?
Exactly, yep.
And like the Ramones never get old. Hey ho, let's go. That song is for the 14-year-old and every person on earth, regardless of how old they are, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? So like when I'm down at School of Rock, Solid Rock, Alice Cooper's place again, which was before I digressed from that digression. Everyone is welcome there. It doesn't matter who you think you are or what color you are. Alice Cooper is one of the greatest rock stars who ever lived, and not only for always being ahead of his time, right, but also for leaving the world a better place than he found it. They are Christian down there, and no one gets judged. That, as a non-Christian, I always look up to, right? Everyone is welcome at Solid Rock. It doesn't matter. And a lot of the kids are, you know, they come from troubled backgrounds, right? And I was just there yesterday, which is why I'm thinking of it. And now there's like all these 18-year-old, 16-year-old kids, right? They call me rock dad. Like I'm everybody's rock dad down there. And I love it because I don't have kids. You know what I mean? So that these kids see like, hey, if a guy like this can get through life. And believe me, I was a messed up teenager for sure. Super shy, believe it or not. Super lonely, socially inept, didn't know how to talk to girls. all of it. I didn't know what to do until I got on stage. And then I was like, oh, this is why I don't fit in anywhere else. This is my home, right? And I could relate to people, and it was a different dynamic, and I could try to give them joy and fear and whatever the hell, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, at Solid Rock, if you're out there, you got a home. You are welcome, and nobody judges anything. And that, to me, is the best version of Christianity there is, based in love and acceptance, right? Again, to reiterate, I am not Christian, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody passes judgment on me, and they let me, you know what I mean? And I get to go down there, and I always feel better leaving than when I came in. No matter what happened to me in the day, when I leave, I feel better, you know? And yeah, sure, there's a comment, Alex, you're so close, man. Just to open the door, you're so close. I'm like, dude, I can't get into the team thing. What we both believe in. To me, you don't need to be part of one specific team. It's available to all of us. It's an inherent part of physics, right? It's physics. Everything is energy and frequencies. Everything is energy and frequencies. We, through living, have a direct impact on energy and frequency because we are active energy and frequency, right? So anyway, that's why I don't want to believe in like one specific God. I think we are responsible for creating the best world we possibly can. And again, I don't want any middlemen. I'm responsible. I'm responsible for my actions and whatever. So anyway, Rock Dad, I love that. Oh, yeah. And they come up to me. They come up to me, and they got their Slipknot patches, and they got their Korn back patches, and they got this, that, and the other thing. I'm thinking about my buddy Hector, who's down there. But you know, they're into Korn and all that stuff, right? They're the generation that came right after Life, Sex, and Death, and they come up to me and they're like, "Oh, hey, did you know that Corey's covering your song?" And to have it come back to me like that from an 18-year-old kid who comes from a troubled home background and loves rock and roll as much as I love rock and roll and have never stopped loving rock and roll, it means the world to me. All I can tell you is it speaks to different generations because what we did was weird and on its own little island of misfit toys, and we're like early Christianity, as it were. We're for all of the people that don't fit in, the blind, the missing limbs, the troubled, whatever. And those are the people that end up making a systemic impact on Earth. It's not the kids that were cool at 16 because they still have their profile picture from 1984. That lets you know that they thought that was as good as it gets. I'm here to tell you it just keeps getting better, right? And so it's just universal music, and because we played it with integrity and intensity, because everything is frequencies, those frequencies are still there, and when it hits people of all age, 14-year-olds of all ages, it still resonates on that level. Again, oh, you guys were just ahead of your time. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Whatever it was, we were there, Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, was it a moment in time, Alex, or could you potentially see doing something with it again? I mean, you're obviously very involved in music and touring and playing with a lot of different people. Could you see either getting that group or a semblance of that group together and continuing on with LSD?
Loaded question. Okay. All right. None of this is meant to throw anyone whatsoever on the bus. Okay. But, I'm the only guy who kept going. Right. Mm-hmm. So to do that, Life, Sex, and Death, I'm looking at the album cover now. To do that takes a certain mindset of a complete immersion. Same thing with Antiproduct, but Antiproduct was literally all me. Not taking anything away from anybody that was in the band, but like I arranged it, I wrote the harmonies, I helped with everybody's parts. They were able to pull it off brilliantly, but Antiproduct is only dead when I am, right? Life, Sex, and Death, everybody had an element in it for sure. The sum of its parts were greater than the individuals for sure. And our chemistry together, be it negative or positive, like I can tell you for a fact, when we wrote Schools for Fools, I was really going through a Ramones phase at that point, right? And me and Brian, our drummer, we had gotten into a huge fight, which is what we always did. We were fire and ice, right? We had gotten into a huge fight, and he was like, "Whatever, I'm done fighting with you." And he got behind the drums and he started playing a beat, and I'm like, and I heard something in my head, and I'm like, well, keep doing that, keep doing it. And the fights came and went like the weather changes, you know what I mean? It was like, it would go away right away if we were onto something. And he was playing that beat from Schools for Fools, and I'm like, no, hang on, wait a minute, keep going. No. Literally, we wrote that song in less time than it takes to listen to. Stan just jumped right in, and before you know it, we were like playing this song, and I'm like, where did this come from? And, you know, it took a little bit of tweaking, obviously, afterwards, but the crux of the thing was there. But I am the only one that continued on a daily basis. So I don't know where Billy and Brian's head's at right now, but I don't think it's been in music for 30 years. So I am not, I think patience is for people that will live forever. And I don't know anybody like that. Right. So, and I refuse, and this applies across the board. If I'm sharing information or teaching or whatever the hell you want to call it, I can be very patient because I want that individual. That individual is worth my complete focus and attempt to bring them into whatever it is they're trying to achieve. But in the rest of life, I am completely impatient because I refuse to slow my role to help the weakest member of the link. I expect them, if they try to run as fast as they can, I will embrace that and do everything I can to bring them along. But I refuse to dumb myself down. I refuse to dumb my intensity down, my willingness to work hard, my desire to achieve and create. I will not slow that down for people that aren't as experienced as I am. So
yeah, I didn't notice.
My buddy Richard from Shark Island, we got a band together. Incidentally, side. He is the guy that Axl stole everything from.
Oh yeah.
Okay, that's common now. Okay, and
I've heard that.
When I produced the last album, and we're just starting to get ready to write again to do another one. But I was working on one of the songs, actually one of my favorite songs, and I didn't really write it. I arranged it and had a bunch to do with it. But there's a song on the album. The album's called Bloodline. I'm as proud of that record as I am of anything, and time will be kind to that record too, even though it may not have been as challenging as Life, Sex, and Death. But I was cutting the vocal together and, you know, building the track around the vocal and whatever. And as I'm going and editing and picking performances and whatever, I'm like, God, this totally reminds me of somebody. Okay, just don't question it. Don't think. If you're playing rock and roll, don't think, trust your gut. Your gut knows way more than your brain. Your brain learns stuff. Your gut knew stuff from the minute you took your first breath. Trust your instincts. Follow the instinct. Follow the instinct. So I'm following the instinct. You know, I take my break and I go smoke some weed, and then I come back, you know, listen with fresh ears and a different perspective. And I come back and I'm like, I just made an Axl Rose performance out of Richard. Right. So I immediately call Richard. I'm like, dude, when Axl would come see you at every single show, were you playing this song? It was an old song that I kind of updated is sort of a condescending word, but I de-80ified it. I took the 80s out of it and made it a little heavier, a little more like if you took Judas Priest and Billy Idol, kind of, or Steve Stevens anyway, and kind of who's another just unbelievable rock god. But anyway, So just kind of updated it a little bit, I guess, for lack of a better word. And he goes, yeah, that was our opening song. And I'm like, Richard, Axl took every single thing he does. The scream is in there. That, you know, that kind of, when he used to have that.
Mm-hmm.
That still, Richard still has it, by the way. But that was all of the cadences, the rhythm, it's a song called Action Is. You can find it on YouTube. Spotify, I'm sure too, but don't, because fuck Spotify. Seriously, fuck darn Spotify. Doesn't have the same impact. Darn Spotify. But seriously, darn Spotify, because it what they do to us as musicians, they exploit us. So that guy can become he has three or four times the money that Paul McCartney does.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So me and my ilk, we're all out there making sure that Joe Rogan gets $250 million. And I got no issue with Joe Rogan, except that's my fucking money. That's everybody who's on there. Snoop had a song on there. It had 3 million spins, right? 3 billion spins. I don't know. It was a lot of spins, more than I'll ever get in my life. He got a check for $3,000.
Wow. It's nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Buy music, or all you're going to get is AI music.
Exactly.
It's knocking on the door. It's knocking on the door, and as soon as some record company who's now only owned by accountants, as soon as they get that one that breaks through and is a hit created solely by AI, I promise you, all background music in movies, at least of a certain budget, it's going to be a wholesale genocide of real musicians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why they need to buy the Life, Sex, and Death from you directly.
And
correct?
Antiproduct and Shark Island.
There we go.
Right.
Everything else you sell. Yeah, absolutely. So, Alex, you know, obviously, I got to ask you, and I know you enjoy these questions probably as much as Snake from Skid Row does about Sebastian Bach rejoining his band.
Your question about the thing. Yes. Okay.
No, we're going to get into Stanley here. You know,
Okay.
obviously.
I was leading to that, but please go on.
Okay. And I was just going to say, you know, instead of me peppering with the questions, because I know you've talked about it a little bit, and I've seen other, interviews you've done, and they kept cutting you off and never let you really finish. Go ahead.
I never do.
Yeah. Go ahead and just, I would like to know just the initial transition from Chris Stan to Stanley. Were you guys aware of it? Did he just kind of show up one day and was like, this is what I'm going to be going forward? Just take us through, I guess, the transition and just whatever you want to let everyone know about that whole thing instead of the little, questions here and there about all that.
Okay. Well, I'm going to couch it. Okay. So
sure.
I'm going to be selective in my usage of words. First of all, let me say this, which is sort of ancillary to your initial question there. Stanley and I will talk once or twice a week, right? There was a time where we didn't talk at all for years and years and years, if not a decade, if not more, right?
Okay, sure.
At least a decade, we didn't like each other. And then we began to appreciate how important the other one was to what we did, right? This would have been in the early 2000s. Around 2005, we kind of baby steps back into friendship. He was like 19. I was like 21 when we first started working together. Our first band was called Bottoms Up, okay, which was a great band. Didn't really sound like Life, Sex, and Death, but it was a great band and a very, very, very unique band. Sorry, I'm just like reflecting on all the stuff that we did. But so we began to have an appreciation of what each other brought to the table as far as how we worked together. And that would have been in that era right there in probably the late 80s, I'm guessing. Or no, the mid 80s, because it was the first band. It was the second band I ever played with was Bottoms Up, right?
Okay.
Now, at the time, Chris, he was already... To this day, I really have no understanding of where his inspiration comes from. It is a completely unique, special, rarefied place where his thought process originates. Unequivocally, if there is such a thing as a genius, which I do believe there is, I would absolutely call Chris a genius. Absolutely. When we were in Bottoms Up I don't know why, now that I think about it, except just for like impact and because he's such a unique individual. We had a character that he played that was called the Nerd. Okay. We referred to him as the Nerd. Those glasses are his real glasses, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Right? That was not part of the act. That's how he saw things, literally. His eyesight was that bad. There were, wait, hang on, let me get the perspective. There, half an inch of glasses, right? So he would come in. He had long hair at the time, and he would stick that up into a stocking cap, and he wore a trench coat, right? So he would come in, and he would start messing with people. Right. Oh, you know, and just putting an energy in the room that wasn't there before the Nerd showed up. And then when the show would start, I don't know if we came on first. I don't think he was doing the thing. I don't know if he started the set. This is still in Bottoms Up days. Okay. So anyway, he would come on stage, still dressed as the Nerd, and everybody in the audience would be like, "Oh my God, it's that guy that I just told to get the darn away from me," and you know, who was hassling my girlfriend or whatever, or spilled the beer on himself or whatever he would get up to. It wasn't. It didn't get like as he would cross certain thresholds and barriers. That would be his new norm, and then he would have to start from there to go even further, you know what I mean, for his own entertainment and involvement. But so he would do that, and then like into the second song at some point, he would pull the stocking cap off, his hair would come tumbling out, and he would take the glasses off and the trench coat, and he would have like cool rock guy, but still not like normal rock guy, but like cool rock guy, but totally from a different perspective, you know, the same way like you would see Perry Farrell, you know, with Jane's Addiction, and it would be rock and roll, but it would be a different kind of rock and roll persona, right? But it was still rock and roll. And then, you know, we would do the set, and then people would be like, "Oh my God, whoa, this is totally," and we'd immediately have a visceral and an emotional response to the information we were presenting them, right? So, that's where it started, right? And the other thing that he would always do is he would always get there about 2 minutes after we were supposed to be on, right? Once we became Life, Sex, and Death. No, that's not true. Even during the Bottoms Up days, when we were playing in Chicago, which is the only market that we had then, and once we'd been established, he would always show up just in the nick of time. So everybody would be like, what's going on? Where's Chris? What's going on? You know, and until we became to realize it was another, I assume, unless he was just horrible with time, but it was another facet to the performance where already there was a state of heightened emotionality in the room before he even walked in the door, which does lead me to an inevitable sidebar. Richard Black, what he used to do in Shark Island when Axl Rose was learning how to do what Axl Rose learned how to do from Richard Black, he would never, ever, ever walk through the front door, right? He literally, this is Richard now, not Stanley, he literally would get into a flight case in his stage gear. He would be wheeled in just like he was an amplifier. All of a sudden, he would be backstage, and when the show was done, he would get back into the flight case and they would wheel him out. He was never from Earth. He always just appeared and disappeared. I love that. I love the thought process. And it does remind me of Stanley stuff. It's not what Stanley ever did, but it does remind me of the, like, taking it to the next level. You know what I mean? Then as he didn't full-time become Stanley until we moved to Los Angeles. Right.
Okay.
He didn't full-time become that. And here is the thing. Yes, it's true. His family had significant wealth. Okay. But the five of us lived in a studio apartment in the Oakwoods in California, which flattened in the earthquake in 94, I guess it was. But we all, the four of us in the band, and then Kimba, who was like our everything, tour manager, emotional support, dog, animal, human, emotional support, human, voice of reason, facilitator, truth teller. Kimba came with us because we were all broken than the 10 Commandments. Chris was able to afford a studio apartment when none of us could afford anything, right? So the five of us were living in the studio apartment. A man of means, a young man of means, I guess at the time, but he didn't have to do this ever. Every single night at 10 o'clock, he would leave the apartment as we were settling down to do whatever we were going to do before we fell asleep at 1 or whatever time in the morning. And he wouldn't come back. This is every single day. And he wouldn't come back until 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. And he would tell us about what he had done in the night and who his friends were out there on the street. Now, let me ask you, what's crazier? Actually doing it by choice and living that life? That guy's crazy.
Yeah.
Right? So that and it took me a long time to figure out where I was like, he did that every single night by choice. And that let me know this guy is totally on his own planet. The rest of us aspire to, and hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn when I say this, because I love Chris and we are better friends now than we have ever been. And Life, Sex, and Death largely, not exclusively, but largely was our brainchild, right? I mean, we were the driving force behind that. You know what I mean? To the most part, my riffs, his perspective and melodies, right? But he also wrote riffs that are in the songs, and then I wrote melodies and words. So, you know, it was pretty much an equal share. And the other guys got it and went along with the plan and brought their own energy to it. So I'm not taking anybody out of the equation. I'm just saying, you know, the Beatles weren't the Beatles without Ringo, but he got like one song every 5 albums, but they still wouldn't have been the Beatles without him, is what I'm saying. So, and this is me hopefully not saying anything in any way disrespectful to anyone. Chris, Stanley, I'll just call him Stanley from now on, now that everybody knows who Chris is. He had a fraught relationship with his pops, right, with his dad. And his dad died when Chris was young. Like, I knew him, but we had just only kind of gotten to work together. So maybe he was 20, 21. I'm not exactly sure. There was a lot of not closure in that relationship because his dad died suddenly. One thing that his dad always said to him was, "You're never going to be anything more than a no good, dirty bum." Right?
Right.
And lo and behold, Chris manifested that and created Life, Sex, and Death, and one of the most unique personalities that rock and roll will ever see.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Brian Wilson's dad, they did not get along. You know what I mean? We all saw Purple Rain. You know, the drive comes from somewhere. Stable, balanced people don't make good art. They don't have to. It's all of us misfit toys. We need rock and roll. We need art. We make rock and roll. We make art. Stable, balanced people don't need that. They don't need that in their lives. They already got it together. But us freaks, us weirdos, those of us on the outskirts of normal society, we need that. We need that connection. That's why people, like, I can get along with, one of my favorite things, I am decidedly left, right? But one of my favorite things to do is when I meet people that don't share my politics and I'm able to cross the bridge. And you know what the bridge always is? It's always rock and roll. And you know what happens? On a one-to-one basis, we are disproving all of the propaganda and the hatred that we are expected to believe to be true. When I can talk to somebody about Iron Maiden, regardless of what I think about Trump, we have Iron Maiden in common. We have Van Halen in common. We have our youths. We have what that meant to us in common. And all of that man-made bullshit that's politics melts away. It doesn't exist. And I have, and literally, and part of the reason this is at the forefront of my brain is two of the people, and I only know them through the internet, but they started out by making comments about, you know, oh, your politics, you libtard and whatever. It's like, dude, believe me, you don't want me to embrace who I am. I am a libtard because otherwise I would absolutely be a murderous psychopath. I'm serious too. It's in my genes. I would absolutely not be a cool person to know. It's better for everyone that I ended up this way. But and like I would, so they would hurl an insult at me as a stranger, not knowing anything about me, and I would question that. I would be like, you don't really know me. You know, and I would go to their little website page or whatever the hell, and I'd be like, oh my God, he rescues dogs. And I would go back. I'm like, dude, I'm not even going to say anything bad about you because you love animals and I love animals. So we are ready. And then I, you know, and this is one guy in particular that I'm thinking of now, but there's numerous subsequently where I'm like, wait a minute, this is working. We have rock and roll in common. How cool is that? I can talk about rock and roll with somebody and we don't give a darn. We don't give a darn about any of the political stuff because we know at our core we have the same love for the same stuff, right? So, and then being able to find a commonality, and then like I'm talking to these guys every day on the internet and whatever, and then it just occurred to me with two of my friends in particular, now friends that I never knew before, where we were able to find common ground. I'm like, wait a minute, all of this started because we didn't like each other and we both, not to quote ourselves, rose above that and didn't let ourselves get dragged into the muck because it's like, wait a minute, this libtard loves animals and he loves Maiden. I love animals and I love Maiden. And we end up apologizing to each other, finding common ground. My best friend was career military and career cop. Me and him do not share the same politics at all, but we learn from each other. And so if this is normally, you'd spread my hands much farther, but hang on, wait a minute. Okay. So if this is him, if this is me on the left, and then this is him on the right, well, here, I'll go back even further. Whoop, let me not knock that guitar over. If this is me on the left and him over here on the right, all this stuff in the middle is what we have in common. And so I am learning that it works. And I think on a one-to-one level, Americans will get along as long as we give ourselves the chance, because we do have the same dreams. We do want what's better for everyone. And my best friend taught me so much that I had not considered because I am left. But in interfacing with a person who didn't share my politics, I was like, that actually totally makes sense. You're right. No, that makes sense. So it's a give and take, and as a result, we are more complete. And when these guys that I met on the internet that started out by insulting me without knowing who I am, and they were rational, good people, we have subsequently apologized to each other, and we, on a one-on-one relationship, are finding ways to bring the country back together. And that's because of rock and roll. So I am proud as shit of that, but that has nothing to do with your question, I realize, but I had to get that off my chest. So anyway, when we moved to California, that's what he did every night. Every night he went out into the streets, right, and lived that life. And then, but we also, not being the stupidest people on earth, we also realized the effect that the nerd had on audiences back home. And Chris is all or nothing in everything he does. Like, he's a dad now, and he lives for his children, right? He lives for them. There is nothing he won't do for them. And we've both become much more humble. And now that, like, I had half the record company telling me, oh, it's because of you. And he had half the record company, oh, it's because of you. And we believed it because we allowed ourselves to be duped. But now we've come to a place where there is nothing but respect and gratitude towards each other. I'm not going to go into too many details because I feel as though it might jinx some stuff. Mm-hmm. I will say this. I don't see a scenario, because, again, I'm the only one who continued, but I don't see a scenario where there will be a Life, Sex, and Death reunion with the original 4 members. Because I'm not going to get on stage with a bunch of middle-aged dudes that didn't keep the fire in their belly, because I'm not patient. And I'm not into holding hands. And I'm not here to suffer fools. I'm not here to waste my time. I'm here to tell it like it is and do the best I can at everything, if it's taking care of mom or playing guitar or whatever. So, no, I don't see the original 4 of us getting back together. I would not say that Chris and I will never write again.
Okay.
I would not say that. I would not say it would be Life, Sex, and Death. I don't know, right? Mm-hmm. Because of his mind and how it works and the amount that I learned from him as a musician. Because he plays everything. He plays guitar, he plays harmonica, he plays piano, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Balalaika, he plays everything, right? And his brain is brilliant. It's inspiring to work with an artist of that caliber. He made a personality that those who know will never forget.
Right. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
No, he definitely did. Well, Alex, man.
Okay, bye.
No, not. I mean, you have thrown a zillion things at us, man. That's a lot to digest. I'll tell you what. Let's stop here. Of course, Life, Sex, and Death, The Silent Majority is out there. Buy it somewhere. Don't just stream it.
Buy it from me.
Tell them where to buy it.
Just get a hold of me on any social media. I answer them all. We'll have a communication. I want to hear how people discovered the band. I want to hear how old you are. I want to hear how it makes you feel. Why are you into it now? Where the fuck were you 32 years ago?
Right. Well, one more time. It's Life, Sex, and Death, The Silent Majority. And Alex, thanks so much for joining us here on Aftershocks TV.
My pleasure, guys. Have a great everything.
Thanks.